Okay, I got a 1986 Chevrolet Corvette. Trying to get to the ignition switch, not the ignition tumbler that's in the steering column. There's plenty of videos there. I sat through a 15-minute video on how to get the ignition switch out with a lot of swearing and cussing and groaning. But let me give you the Cliff Note version. There's a few 7mm headed bolts right on the bottom of this trim panel, the knee bolster right here. It's tough to see, but it's right around the light on that plastic part. Take those 7mm headed bolts out. On the firewall between the pedals, there's that plastic wing nut. You got to take that down. I used some penetrating oil because it's actually a metal wing nut on a metal stud. So that came off. Now that panel should come down, and there's some wires there for a light. I actually took the 4 Phillips screws right on the front of this trim. 1, 2 there. 3, and then 4 next to the steering wheel. And that whole trim panel came down. The OBD1 connector is still connected. You got to take those screws out. I got the trim panels all the way down. There was that one screw holding the OBD2 connector on the end, and then it kind of like clipped into this metal part here. Now, there's 2 15mm bolt heads. Now, if you remember GM in the 80s, late 70s, early 80s, it was half metric, half standard. So have both of those tools ready because they're either 3/8 or 5/16 holding the switch to the top of the steering column. I'll show you where to loosen the steering column to drop it down. I'm not actually going to do it, I don't think yet, but I'll show you where everything is. So that 15mm bolt and one on the other side of the steering column have to come down to let the steering column down. Now that the steering column is dropped down sometimes you have to loosen up the front bolts to get more access. I'm hitting the trim up here, so that's as far as down as I'm going. There's a 5/16 or a 3/8 bolts, 2 of them, holding the ignition switch to the top of the steering column. These rods go underneath here. Once you take those 2 screws out, the switch will drop down on the passenger side of the steering column, and then you disconnect the black connector, then the blue connector to get the ignition switch out. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.